The streets of Naples. The city of Naples never sleeps. Even at midnight, its streets hum with life. Scooters weaving between cars, voices rising from balconies, the aroma of fried pizza and sweet sfogliatelle drifting through the humid air. The city is a theater, and every night a new drama unfolds on its stage. By the sea, in Mergellina, the mood is lighter. Here, the shoreline is a meeting place, a breathing space where the city's youth gather to forget their troubles. The sound of waves mixes with laughter, bottles clinking, and music spilling from portable speakers. The Gulf glows under the streetlights, and Mount Vesuvius looms like a silent guardian in the distance. For many, this place is a sanctuary. Among the crowd that March night was Francesco Pio Maimone. Just 18, he carried himself with a quiet confidence, the kind that comes from knowing who you are even if the world hasn't yet recognized it. His friends called him Ciccio, a nickname that followed him since childhood. To them, he was reliable, always willing to help, always smiling. "Ciccio, when you open your pizzeria, I'll be your first customer," joked one of his friends, taking a long sip of beer. Francesco laughed, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "No, you'll be working there with me. Someone has to clean the tables." They burst into laughter, their voices mingling with the sound of the sea. For Francesco, this dream was more than a fantasy. He had worked as a mason, his hands hardened by labor, his back sore from lifting bricks, but his mind was always elsewhere, imagining a place of his own, where families would gather, where his name would shine above the doorway. A simple dream, but in Naples, simplicity is often the most fragile treasure. Across the square, another figure prowled through the night. Francesco Pio Valda. At 20, he should have shared the same laughter, the same innocence, but his path had been written in darker ink. His sneakers gleamed white under the streetlights, spotless and new, a symbol of pride, of identity, of money earned in ways he would never admit to outsiders. He walked with the swagger of someone who believed the world owed him deference. To Valda, the streets were not places of friendship but arenas of power. He had grown up in Barra, a district marked by the scars of Camorra feuds. The whispers of his father's crimes, his brother's imprisonment, and his family's connections to the Caccaro clan followed him everywhere. Violence was not a choice for him, it was a heritage. As he approached the crowd, a bump occurred. Nothing unusual in a place so crowded. A foot landed squarely on his sneaker. A faint smudge appeared on the pristine surface. "Watch where you're going," Valda snapped, his eyes narrowing. The boy who had stepped on him stammered an apology, raising his hands. "I didn't mean to, sorry man." But for Valda, apologies were not enough. In the distorted code of his world, even an accident was disrespect. Fear was his only shield, and it had to be sharpened constantly. To let this pass would mean weakness. Weakness was death. His hand went to his waistband. The metallic glint of a pistol appeared under the yellow glow of the streetlights. The crowd froze. "Are you crazy?" someone muttered. Valda fired into the air. The sound split the night, scattering birds into the sky, silencing laughter in an instant. People screamed, ducking, grabbing friends, pulling strangers into cover. And then, as if the sky itself demanded blood, Valda turned the weapon. His finger tightened. The bullet struck Francesco Pio Maimone in the chest. For a moment, time stopped. Ciccio's friends watched in disbelief as he staggered, confusion painted across his face. He clutched his chest, warm blood seeping through his shirt. His knees buckled, and he fell onto the cobblestones, the laughter of minutes ago replaced by gasps and cries. "No! Ciccio! Stay with us!" one of his friends screamed, kneeling beside him. Francesco tried to speak, but no words came. His eyes widened, then dimmed, as if the light inside him had been stolen. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was already gone. The silence after gunfire. In Naples, gunfire is not a stranger. But every bullet carries consequences. By morning, the newspapers spread the news. 18-year-old killed in Mergellina. To some, it was another headline, another statistic in a city too familiar with violence. But to those who knew him, and to those who still dared to hope for a better Naples, it was an unbearable tragedy. "He was just a boy," said his mother, clutching his photograph in her hands. He wanted to work, to build something. He wasn't like them. The them was clear. The sons of Camorra, the heirs of a poisoned crown. Boys like Valda, whose families treated fear as currency and violence as a rite of passage. But to the Camorra, the killing was not chaos. It was a message, a performance. Even in absurdity, even in spilling innocent blood, the act created fear, and fear was power. Two names, two worlds. The irony was cruel. Both shared the same name, Francesco Pio. Yet they lived in two different universes. Maimone, the dreamer, son of a humble family, carrying bricks during the day and carrying hope at night. Valda, the inheritor of blood, his footsteps echoing in alleys ruled by the Caccaro clan. His life a repetition of mistakes passed from father to son. One name, two destinies. Creation versus destruction, hope versus fear. The code of the streets. To outsiders, the crime seemed senseless. A death over sneakers. But in Naples' criminal underworld, nothing is senseless. The code of honor, if it can be called that, is twisted, perverse. Honor is not earned by kindness but by intimidation. Respect is not given, it is extracted through fear. Step on a man's shoes, and you step on his pride. In this logic, blood becomes the only currency strong enough to erase the stain. The Camorra thrives on this cycle, teaching boys that the only way to be remembered is to make others tremble. To be feared is to exist. To be anonymous is to die. Echoes in the city. In Mergellina, the sea kept moving, waves brushing the shore as if indifferent to human tragedy. By morning, the sun rose over the gulf, painting the water in gold. Tourists sipped coffee at seaside cafes, unaware, or perhaps unwilling to dwell, on the blood spilled hours before. But in Pianura, a family mourned. In Barra, another family braced for consequences. And across Naples, whispers spread. Another innocent lost, another reminder that in this city, safety is fragile, and life can be stolen in a heartbeat. This was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. For in Naples, every death echoes. Every act of violence ripples through the fabric of the city, shaping its people, its children, its future. The story of Francesco Pio Maimone was not just about a boy killed. It was about a city caught between beauty and brutality, hope and despair. It was about the streets of Naples, where the line between life and death is drawn not by destiny, but by the pull of a trigger. Bloodlines of the Camorra. Naples is a city of masks. To the tourists who flock to Piazza del Plebiscito or climb the winding alleys of Spaccanapoli, the city smiles, a place of music, food, and passion. But behind the laughter and color lies another face, one carved from fear and silence. Here, power is not written in marble but in shadows, and shadows often bear family names. One such name was Valda, the legacy of Barra. The district of Barra, in the eastern sprawl of Naples, had long been a theater of violence. Crumbling buildings, narrow streets, and hidden courtyards formed a labyrinth where poverty and crime entwined like vines. For decades, the Caccaro clan ruled here with an iron fist, their power enforced by gunmen and their wealth fueled by drugs, extortion, and fear. The Valda family lived under this shadow. They were not outsiders to the clan. They were bound to it, servants and soldiers in its service. Children were born into this world the way others are born into farming or fishing. Except here, the trade was blood. Giuseppe Valda, the patriarch, had spent most of his life behind bars. His crimes, robbery, arms trafficking, violence, were the vocabulary of his existence. He was a man who had never known another way to survive. To him, prison was not punishment but routine, a place where old alliances were maintained and new deals forged. When his son, Francesco Pio Valda, was born, Giuseppe was already in and out of jail. The boy grew up with stories of his father's honor, tales of loyalty to the clan, of respect earned through violence. At the dinner table when he was home, Giuseppe spoke not of education or work but of the code. "The streets are your family," he would say, "and family must be feared. Respect is not asked for, it is taken." The boy listened, and he learned. Childhood in the shadow. While other children played soccer in the courtyards, Francesco Pio was taught to watch, to measure, to never forget a slight. When he was 12, he saw his first shooting. A man collapsed in the street, blood pooling beneath him, while the neighbors closed their windows and pulled their children inside. "Why doesn't anyone call the police?" the boy asked his uncle. His uncle gave a bitter smile. "In Barra, the police don't protect us. The clan does. Remember that." At school, teachers recognized the boy's sharp intelligence but also his growing arrogance. He was restless, quick to anger, always needing to prove himself. When mocked for his last name, he lashed out with fists. Every insult became an enemy, every glance a challenge. By 16, he had stopped going to school altogether. He followed older boys into the alleys at night, learning how to sell drugs in the shadows of apartment blocks. He wore the latest sneakers, the newest jackets, not bought by honest work but by coins that smelled of powder and fear. The brotherhood of violence. In Barra, boys like him formed their own brotherhoods. They called themselves Parans, small gangs of teenagers who dreamed of power, imitating the older bosses but hungrier, more reckless. These boys played with pistols as if they were toys. They posed for photos with weapons, filmed themselves speeding through the streets on stolen scooters, their faces hidden under helmets. To them, it was a game, a deadly one. Each action was designed for reputation. To be feared was to be admired. Francesco Pio became one of their leaders, not because he was the strongest, but because he was the boldest. He dared to pull the trigger where others hesitated. He understood the code: violence is performance, and in Naples, audiences always remember the boldest acts. A family of blood. But the true stage was his family's history. His father Giuseppe's name carried weight, even from prison. His brother was already serving time for violent crimes. Each conviction, instead of shaming the family, only hardened their reputation. In their neighborhood, neighbors whispered but did not confront. The Valdas, don't cross them. Fear was their inheritance, and young Francesco Pio wore it like a crown. Yet the crown was heavy. Behind the swagger, behind the spotless sneakers, was a boy trapped by a destiny he never chose. In a city where hope required rebellion, he had instead embraced submission, to the clan, to the code, to the cycle that had destroyed his father and would one day destroy him. The collision of two worlds. And so, on that March night in Mergellina, the threads of destiny pulled tight. Two boys named Francesco Pio, one dreaming of a pizzeria, the other of dominance, met not as friends, but as symbols of two different Naples. One represented the fragile hope that the city could be built with hands that carried bricks instead of guns. The other embodied the dark inheritance of the Camorra, where even an accidental step on a sneaker could ignite a storm of blood. The shot that killed Francesco Pio Maimone was not fired in isolation. It carried the weight of generations. Fathers who taught their sons to fear weakness, clans that thrived on obedience, and a city too often resigned to its shadows. The funeral of innocence. The bells of Naples tolled with a somber rhythm, heavy and unrelenting, echoing across the Gulf. On the morning after the shooting, the news had spread faster than the sea breeze. An innocent boy, Francesco Pio Maimone, 18 years old, was gone. His body lay inside a modest coffin, carried through the narrow streets of Pianura, the neighborhood where he had been born. White flowers covered the lid, their fragrance mixing with the salt of tears and the smoke of candles. The mother's cry. At the front of the procession walked his mother. Her voice was hoarse, broken not by words but by the raw sound of grief. Why? Why him? He was only a boy. Neighbors held her arms, trying to keep her from collapsing, but nothing could restrain the flood of anguish. She had spent her life protecting him from the dangers of Naples, the gangs, the temptations, the lure of the streets. She dreamed that he would escape the chains of poverty, that his strong hands would build houses, shape dough, create a life of dignity. Now those hands were folded on his chest, lifeless. Friends in silence. Around the coffin walked his friends, boys and girls his own age, their faces pale, some hiding tears behind dark glasses. They were the ones who had been with him in Mergellina that night, laughing, eating taralli, drinking sodas by the sea. They had seen how quickly joy could turn into horror. The gun had spoken only once, but its echo would haunt them forever. One moment he was smiling, telling a joke. The next, he was lying on the ground, blood spreading across his shirt, his breath leaving him in shallow gasps. None of them would forget the silence that followed, the kind of silence that only death can bring. The church. Inside the small church, candles flickered against the stone walls. The priest, his voice trembling, spoke words of peace, but even he could not disguise the anger beneath his prayer. How long must our young die before we learn? How many coffins must pass through these doors? Francesco was not a criminal. He was not part of the Camorra. He was a son, a brother, a friend. And now he is gone, not because of fate, but because of violence that should never exist. Every word pierced the congregation. People nodded, others clenched their fists. But no one spoke aloud what they all knew. In Naples, justice was too often delayed, and grief was too often repeated. 2 Francescos. Outside, journalists gathered. Their cameras caught the tears, the flowers, the waves of mourners. They spoke of a cruel coincidence. 2 boys sharing the same name, Francesco Pio. One, Maimone, an innocent dreamer. The other, Valda, the son of a clan, raised in shadows. It was more than coincidence. It was a metaphor for Naples itself, a city torn between 2 destinies, one of creation, the other of destruction. The symbol. As the coffin was lowered into the ground, silence fell once more. Only the sobbing of his mother broke the air. "Take care of him, Lord," she whispered. "He only wanted to live." The mourners threw white roses into the grave. To them, Francesco Pio Maimone became more than a boy. He became a symbol. A reminder of what was at stake, of what was lost each time violence claimed another innocent life. For in that coffin lay not only a son but also the fragile hope of a different Naples. Echoes of outrage. The day after the funeral, the city of Naples seemed different. The Gulf, usually alive with chatter and music, stood in silence. The streets of Pianura, Mergellina, and Barra buzzed not with laughter, but with whispers, angry, fearful, uncertain. The name Francesco Pio Maimone was on everyone's lips. It was no longer just the story of a single neighborhood. It had become the story of a city, a mirror reflecting all its contradictions. The people speak. At the marketplace, old women clutched their rosaries, muttering prayers as they sold fruit. "They kill for shoes now," one asked, her voice trembling. "What future is left for our children if life costs less than a pair of sneakers?" Young men gathered at street corners, fists clenched, speaking in low tones about revenge, about justice, about despair. Some blamed the police for being absent, others cursed the politicians who only remembered Naples during elections. Mothers, clutching their sons tighter, whispered warnings. "Don't stay out too late. Don't look anyone in the eyes. Don't let anger swallow you." The city was restless, every corner vibrating with grief and rage. The police. In the headquarters of the Carabinieri, the mood was tense. Officers examined photos, listened to witness accounts, and replayed security footage from Mergellina. They knew who the suspect was. Francesco Pio Valda, the 20-year-old son of a Camorra family. Colonel Ricci, a man hardened by decades of chasing criminals through Naples' labyrinthine alleys, slammed his fist on the table. "This is not just another murder. This is a declaration. The clans are no longer hiding. They're showing us they don't care about rules, not even their own." The investigation accelerated. Raids were planned, doors kicked down in the dark hours before dawn. They found weapons, drugs, bundles of cash, but the young killer slipped through their grasp, sheltered by silence, hidden by loyalty born of fear. The politicians. In Rome, the case reached Parliament. On television screens across Italy, stern-faced leaders made speeches. They promised justice, reforms, a renewed fight against organized crime. But in Naples, people rolled their eyes. They had heard these promises before, every time another coffin passed through their streets. Justice. A man in Pianura scoffed. "Where was justice when my brother was killed? Where was justice when my cousin was forced into the clan because he had no job? Words don't feed our children. Words don't stop bullets." The divide between the capital and the south, between power and reality, was wider than ever. The media. Journalists flooded Naples. Cameras lingered on crying mothers, on angry crowds, on the white flowers scattered across Mergellina sidewalks. The story spread beyond Italy's borders. Headlines screamed, "Boy murdered over sneakers, Naples in shock." Camorra violence claims another innocent life. When fear becomes power, the new logic of the Mafia. Commentators argued about what the killing meant. Some said it proved the Camorra had lost its old discipline. Others claimed it showed a new generation of criminals, more reckless, more desperate, more hungry for respect bought through terror. One thing was clear: the rules had changed. A new kind of fear. In the old days, killing an innocent would have been punished by the clans themselves. It was bad for business. It brought too much attention. But now, fear itself was currency. The randomness of violence made it more powerful, more terrifying. A father in Barra put it simply as he closed the shutters of his shop early. Before, you feared crossing the Camorra. Now, you fear breathing near them. The city was learning that even innocence could not protect you. The symbol of resistance. Amidst the darkness, voices began to rise, not of politicians or priests, but of ordinary people. Francesco's friends created murals with his face, candles glowing beneath them at night. Musicians wrote songs in his memory, their melodies carrying through the alleys like prayers. "Francesco is us," they said. "If we stay silent, we accept that any of us could be next." His death, meaningless in its cruelty, began to carry meaning in its aftermath. It awakened something long dormant, the will to resist, to speak, to refuse to bow completely. The turning point. For the Camorra, the killing of Francesco Pio Maimone was a show of strength. But for the people of Naples, it was something else entirely, a breaking point. Whispers grew into shouts. Grief turned into fury. And from the ashes of despair, a question began to rise. Could this boy's death become the spark that changed everything? Shadows and light. Night falls again on Naples. The gulf glitters with the reflection of 1,000 lights, but beneath the surface, shadows linger. The memory of Francesco Pio Maimone drifts through the alleys like a ghost, silent but impossible to ignore. The Camorra divided. In the smoky rooms where the Camorra clans gather, arguments erupt. The old bosses slam their fists on wooden tables. "In our time," one growls, "you did not kill innocents. It brought the state to your doorstep. It brought chaos we did not need." But the younger men laugh, their tattoos gleaming under dim bulbs. "Respect comes from fear," they say. "What use are rules in a world where only terror matters?" For the first time in years, cracks appear in the underworld's armor. The old guard sees power slipping away, replaced by reckless violence that threatens even their survival. The new generation sees no future but blood. The streets of Naples tremble, caught between two worlds, the order of the past and the chaos of the present. The people's defiance. In Pianura, in Barra, in Mergellina, candles burn each night for Francesco. Mothers march with photographs of their sons, shouting, "No more sons buried for nothing. No more silence." Students paint murals on crumbling walls, bright colors against gray stone. Wings, light, the smiling face of a boy who only wanted to build a life. His dream of opening a pizzeria becomes a symbol. A place where friends could gather without fear, where laughter could exist without the echo of gunfire. Little by little, the silence that once protected the clans begins to crack. People speak. People remember. People refuse to forget. Justice, fragile and uncertain. The trial begins. Francesco Pio Valda sits in the courtroom, expression hard, eyes avoiding the family of the boy he killed. The mother of Francesco Maimone raises her voice, trembling yet unbroken. "You took my son, but you will not take his name. He lives in all of us now." The verdict will not bring her child back. No sentence can erase the horror, but it marks a line, however thin, between law and lawlessness. And for Naples, even a fragile line is something worth clinging to. Naples at the crossroads. The city breathes, restless as ever. The Camorra is not defeated. Its grip remains strong. But something has shifted. The death of one boy over a pair of sneakers has forced a reckoning. Naples now stands at a crossroads. Will fear continue to rule its streets? Or will the memory of Francesco light a different path? The eternal lesson. As dawn breaks over the gulf, the sea sparkles, indifferent yet eternal. Children run along the shore, their laughter carried by the wind. Life, fragile but stubborn, continues. The story of Francesco Pio Maimone is not just about Naples. It is about every place where violence seeks to crush hope, where fear masquerades as respect, where lives are stolen before they truly begin. And so the city whispers a promise. He will not be forgotten. His life will not be reduced to tragedy alone. Out of the darkness of his death, we will search for light. Epilogue. Naples is a city of contradictions, of beauty and brutality, of music and mourning, of light and shadow. The Camorra still prowls its alleys, still feeds on despair. But in every candle lit for Francesco, in every mural painted in his honor, in every voice that dares to speak, there is defiance. And perhaps one day, that defiance will grow strong enough to break the chains. Until then, Naples endures. And the name of Francesco Pio Maimone endures with it.